you what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way.
We're here to talk about evolution of Homo DevOps-ifying and a history of tribal cultures. By this time, you should be asking if you are in the right session, or more likely, am I in the right conference, right? I'm told that this is called imposter syndrome, and it is going to be okay. As we all know, sometime in the future, Skynet becomes self-aware. I think the date is August 29th. And some kind of an archaeological AI system dug this fossil of bones up and identified it as the remains of a full-stack DevOps engineer, right? So this threw the machines into a complete tailspin because they had the answer that it was a full-stack DevOps engineer, but they really couldn't figure out what it means. So as introduced, I won't spend too much time on this. My name is Shiva. I generally go by the title learner of systems and thinker of things and practicer of practices, and I happen to be doing those things at a company called Envato at the moment. Before that, I've been with AWS for a few years, and Unico and Accenture and Infosys in recorded history. So we all know, and if you didn't know, the answer is 42, right? More important is the questions. So this session, if you're thinking of you're going to get some answers from this session, you might want to take a break. This session is going to be mostly about questions that I have that you're going to help me answer. Lucy belonged to a tribe which comprises of multiple fully autonomous full-stack hunter-gatherers. 2 pizza teams, presumably a paleo pizza, and they had full autonomy. They lived in separate siloed caves, and they had full freedom to actually go out and use whatever tools they wanted and whatever processes that they need to bring back food. And it was a strictly you kill it, you eat it policy, right? So you kind of get the drift of where I'm going with this. But why do we need to go so far back in history, and what does it have to do with this conference and the topic that we're talking about? I think it does, and if I'm successful, I will bring the connection back towards the end of the talk. The connection is that there's a man called Joseph Campbell who wrote this book who believed that there's only one story in humankind, which has been passed across times and across cultures and everything. It's the story of the archetype hero or heroine who comes out of a common day, goes into a world of wonder and is amazed, overcomes hurdles, has battles, and gains experience and learns in this wondrous environment, and comes back with the experience and the knowledge that he or she can hand back to the rest of the mankind. So this is the story that we've always had. Every story that you ever know is this story. So now think back. Moses, Jesus, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Luke Skywalker, Iron Man, full-stack DevOps engineer who is on call, going into production, solving a problem, and coming back and writing a PAR. It's the same story, right? So to figure out where we are going or where we are at the moment, we only have to look back and find out where we came from. So that's my connection. Coming back to Lucy again. So Lucy belonged to a tribe which was pre-Homo habilis, right? Belonged to a tribe, a genus called Australopithecus. So these, we believe, were the first to develop the opposing thumb. And an opposing thumb is a prerequisite to be using tools. So these were the rudimentary tools that these tribes were believed to have used. These might not look like much, but for the first time, Lucy and her tribe had something other than their hands and teeth to carve up the big monolithic beasts that they killed, right? Now, fast forward a few million years later, this is the fossilized remains of the first Homo erectus, called Java man. Now, Java man still operated in those autonomous tribes, but was a much better tool maker. So they had much more advanced tools than Lucy had. Now, I see but there was a dimension, there was a new dimension that was added by the Homo erectus. they could actually communicate with hand gestures. So they didn't, they didn't have to throw rocks over walls, siloed cave walls and things like that to communicate. They could actually communicate with hand gestures, which opened up a whole bunch of things, right? Communication was possible. So one fine morning, I sent a communication, something along the lines of Java man coming along and deciding to go on a hunt and seeing one of his tribe members making a tool. And hey, that's a really, really nice tool, really sharp spear, right? But I really don't know how to make tools. My tools always turn out blunt, and I have to hack away at a mammoth so many times before I can kill it. Would you make me a tool? And now the tool maker who's making his tool is like, no, sorry. I got to make my tool and go on my hunt and bring back my meat. And then Java man goes, how about this? You make the tool for me. I'll go out on my hunt, and I'll share my meat with you. Right? Yeah, that works. All right. So the tool man makes the tool, and Java man goes away, hunts, and brings back food. And then other people and he has a really nice tool. So now the other people in the tribe get the same idea, and they go to the tool person and say that, hey, can you make me a tool? Now the tool person says that, yeah, this is a good deal. I can just sit here. I enjoy making tools, and I'll make my tool. You guys give me food. And soon, everybody, the neighboring tribes are coming to the tool person saying that, hey, can you make me a tool? Now the tool man is not able to scale. So now the tool man starts taking apprentices, maybe from the same tribe and different types. Soon he has a team who's making tools, and they're just making tools all the time, and they get really, really, really good at it. Now, the whole tribe has really good tools, and they go out and hunt more meat, and there is prosperity, the population grows, everybody's happy. So we've just had the first tools team develop, right? So they got really, really good at it. So don't laugh, this is real. So if you go to the slide notes, you can find out where you can buy these tools from. So there is this mob in Tel Aviv who is actually making these paleo tools if you wish to have one in your kitchen or workshop. So the link is in the slide notes, which is on GitHub, which I'll share with you. Now, there's something the cultural anthropologists came up a term called cognitive specialization, right? Cognitive specialization is the process by which certain skills and experiences and practices are handed down generations and get further and further refined by natural selection. So soon, down the line, these specialized skills become essential to the survival of that species, right? So, for example, cognitive specialization is responsible for the development of human language, for development of some of our social skills, like trust and reciprocity and things like that. At some point in time down the line, these specialized skills become essential for the survival of the species because they help them better adapt to the habitat, which has changed over time. Fast forward a few 100,000 years. That is Jared Diamond. He was an ornithologist in Papua New Guinea. So he was out in Papua New Guinea, studying birds and things like that. The local tribals would actually take him out into the forest so he can see birds and whatnot. And in his own words, he was the dope who could not follow trails, who could not find food, who could not find water. So the Aboriginal guy in there, a guy called Yali, asked him, the white man is so dumb. You cannot identify tracks, you cannot survive in the forest. But how come you have so much cargo, meaning wealth and possession? You don't have the skills, but how much you have so much wealth? So now this got Jared Diamond thinking, and he wrote a book on it called Guns, Germs, and Steel. So he talks about how a sect of the human civilization had specializations that developed steel and guns and things like that. I won't get into the gems bit. Read the book, really interesting. So we had specialized skills which allowed us to make steel. And with steels and guns, we have gone, and certain civilizations have gone and exterminated other civilizations which did not have these specialized skills, right? And then he wrote a book from the other end, a book called Collapse, and where he studies about why certain civilizations could not adapt and why they died out. So he surmises that maybe they did not develop specializations, or the specializations that they developed did not allow them to adapt to changing conditions. Maybe there was climate change and there was an earthquake or volcano, and their specialized skills did not allow them to survive that, right? So this got me thinking, and this is my favorite slide with a lot of questions. So we all understand from what I was talking about, like initially humankind was 10, 20 people, tribes of hundreds. settled civilizations of tens of thousands, the scale kind of grew. And as the scale grew, there were points of inflections where we couldn't be full stack hunter-gatherers anymore. We had to develop specializations. And when we developed specializations, that created a furious progress. And we were able to go up to the next level, right? Now, think of a two-person startup in a garage. I have no idea why they always have to be in a garage, but a two-person startup who've got this idea and they want to create this. So they create an MVP product and get it out there, right? And it becomes really popular and they have to scale. Now think Pokemon Go, right? So what these two people can do has really changed. Like maybe in the 60s, two people could put together a computer in a garage and it becomes Mac, and it takes a long time. Whereas now, with internet has basically democratized knowledge, right? We have knowledge throughout the world. We have the cloud, which has kind of democratized compute and storage. Everybody has access to compute and storage. And as Pete was talking about in the morning, serverless functions and lambdas and functions have really democratized scale. Right? So with this democratization of these elements, the volume of work or the quantity or quality of product that these two people, a two-person startup can put out there has drastically increased. Right? Like you can really put out a mature product out there. But when it becomes really popular, you still have to scale. At certain point of time, running full stack engineers who do everything or jack of all trades is not going to cut it. At some point in time, there are certain factors that are going to influence where you have to start specializing. So do you have multiple teams with specialists in it? So I have an infrastructure person, I have a QA person, I have a security person, and a developer in one team, right? At some point in time, that's not going to cut it either. And what are the factors and what are the points of inflection when you have to go from there to forming a specialized QA team and a specialized security team? And what are the points of inflection where you have to go from having that specialized team enabling your product teams to having that specialized team now is setting standards. And now we are worried about compliance. So there are laws and there are frameworks. And at certain point of time, at a certain inflection, you go further beyond that and say that you have specialized teams which are putting out best practices, but they're not mandated. Your product teams still have the full autonomy to choose those standards if they want to or not. But you still need some framework. So what are the factors that influence? Is it scale? Is it the customers? Is it the demand? Hence the slide with a lot of questions. I don't have answers. So these are some questions that I'm grappling with at the moment. So let's figure out what the cool kids are doing, right? I promised myself that I'm not going to say the word thought leader on stage. So what are the cool kids doing? Spotify has been quite vocal about how they scale their engineering teams and their DevOps practices, right? I'm not going to go into too much detail about this. The link to the white paper is in the slide notes, but basically they talk about how they have squads. So their squads are their basic unit of development. And they have tribes which comprises of multiple squads. So these are various units of development who are working in a related area. That's a tribe. So within the tribe, they have something called chapter. So these chapters are a horizontal section of specialists. So you will have a tribe of multiple squads, and all the QAs in that tribe across squads will become a chapter, and they will share ideas. And then you have a guild, which is a specialist cross-cutting the entire org. So all the chapters in all the guilds will get together, and that forms a guild, right? So that is the model that they follow. And they also talk about the guardrails which they put in place so that it doesn't just descend into complete autonomous chaos. As I said, the white paper is linked. What does Netflix do? And Netflix has been really vocal about the way and their culture as well. So Reed Hastings, their CEO, I think in early 2000s, has a talk about the 7 pillars of their culture, right? And that talk is linked in the slide notes as well. It's the culture which allows Netflix to come out with these cool tools with cool sounding names like Spinnaker and Hystrix and the Simian Army and Chaos Monkey and things like that, right? So it's the culture which is giving rise to those tools. Now Google, like John in the morning spoke about Google 1 million or 10 million tests in a day. That's just crazy, right? And Google has also given us the term site reliability engineering and wrote a book on it. Awesome book if you haven't read it. Won't talk too much more about Google. Amazon, I'll spend some time in Amazon because there are certain practices that I found when I was working in Amazon, which I think I should share. Everything is in public domain, but I'm just going to be connecting the dots, right? So when I used to work at AWS, and I used to go and talk to customers about DevOps and CI/CD and things like that, and the first question that came back to me was, how does Amazon do it? So though I was a solution architect who were not at the cold phase of developing the services, I spent quite a bit of time trying to figure out how these guys do it and the history of how they got to where they are at the moment. What I found was I always tried to quoting a story which a guy called Greg Linden, who used to work for Amazon, wrote on his blog called Geeking with Greg or something of that sort. So he talks about a story, proposed this idea. A senior vice president of marketing at Amazon put this idea down, saying that, nah, this is not a good idea because you're going to distract a customer from actually going through the checkout process. So if you're going to have abandoned shopping carts, this is not a thing to be done. This guy, so this is a senior VP marketing. So this guy went back, he's a product owner, he owned the shopping cart on the Amazon page or something like that. So he went back and developed this anyway, right? And tested it in their test environment and scheduled a production release to test, to measure whether this is going to have an impact or not. So the culture of Amazon, so this is a story, right? So he was able to go and he actually did a kind of, I'm assuming that he did some kind of an A/B testing, and it brought back data saying that Amazon is losing millions of dollars because you don't have recommendations. So this was proven by data that this was a good idea, and then it was rolled out to the rest of production. Now this story, I tell the story and highlight 3 aspects of the Amazon culture and the way Amazon works, which allowed such a story to be born, right? So the first thing, the culture allows that product manager to question or go against a senior vice president, right? How many organizations make that possible? It is a culture that allows that. And the way it is done is Amazon has these leadership principles, the 14 leadership principles, they're out on the web, Google them. So if you are following the leadership principle framework and you are trying to, you have data to back yourself, you can go talk to anybody, right? So that is a fact. So as long as you're sticking to the framework and you're able to explain based on the framework and you have data, you can go against a VP, right? And it's the culture that allowed it. And these leadership principles are not kind of set in stone principles. The end of the leadership principles reads, unless you know better. So if you have a better principle that you think Amazon should follow internally, you're free to propose that. And there have been modifications to these principles. I think a couple of years back, they added a new one called Learn and Be Curious, and they merged something called Be Vocally Self-Critical into something called Earn Trust of Others, or something of that sort. So these are not set in stone, but this is the cultural framework the entire organization works on. So there's that common framework. And I have never seen in an organization, in any other organization, where the values of the organization, which are these leadership principles, are a part of everyday language. So you will hear them in normal conversations, you will see them in emails, you will see them at sales kickoffs where your leaders are presenting everywhere. I've never seen it in normal usage as much. It is not something that you print and put it on your cubicle. So the culture allowed that experiment to happen. The technology that they had allowed that experiment to happen as well. So at some point in time in the early 2000s, I'm guessing, the senior leadership team reporting into Jeff Bezos had a goal on continuous delivery. So these are the likes of Andy Jassy, who carried a goal on continuous delivery and deployment automation. Why would a senior exec have a goal on continuous delivery, right? It is important because the exec leadership felt that it was important to the business and it mattered to their customers, right? And it gave them a business edge. And when it starts coming from that high, it trickles down and the culture evolves to meet those requirements. So as soon as this was a S-team goal, continuous delivery, all the individual teams started figuring out how we're going to do, 90+% of software delivered had to be continuously delivered or something of that sort, right? So all the teams starts working on it. The first thing that the teams did was that everybody was using their own Jenkins or Travis or whatever it is at that time, right? Or homegrown tools. And the first thing that they did was they all started visualizing their workflow. their continuous delivery workflow. It was not fully automated. There were a lot of massive manual steps. But the first thing that they started doing was visualizing their continuous delivery workflow and where they had manual steps. And they could figure, and they started collecting metrics on it. So soon became a game to find out who could deploy fastest and quickest and across the world and things like that. So that had some good things coming out of it. Also, all these teams were individually doing their own pipeline tools and deployment tools and things like that. And out of this chaos evolved this small team called the Builder Tools team. So the Builder Tools team created their own internal pipeline tool. It is called the pipelines. So the internal pipelines tool is what you now see externally in AWS as code pipeline. The internal tool, continuous deployment tool, was called Apollo. And that is what you now externally see as AWS code deploy. So these Builder Tools team created these tools. The advantage, and these were not mandated, so teams could use whatever they wanted, but the Builder Tool teams had created pipelines in Apollo. The advantage was that the Builder Tools team and these tools made it easy to do the right thing. So these pipelines tool had all the experience and the learnings of everybody who had used those tools. So for example, if I have a new service that I'm coming up with and I need to deploy it across the world in AWS, what you would do is you would go to, and you choose to use the pipelines tool, which is not mandated, canary testing and things like that, canary deployments and things like that. So this tool would have all those. So you just had to create your own workflow, and it would actually go to a region and pick out an AZ, partition off certain fleet, production fleet, from the AZ, deploy to that, do synthetic testing while it is deploying, and if there is one SLA failure while it is deploying in production, it will automatically roll back, and nobody would be woken up in the middle of the night. So you just had to inherit this master template, and you had all those best practices already there. Or you could choose your own tool and do it the hard way. That's fine as well, right? So soon we found that more than 90% of developers were actually using the pipelines tool. Right? And then the Builder Tools team did Apollo and their secret management system and a whole bunch of things like that. So the tools allowed safe production releases, which means that you can make mistakes, but your customers are not going to be affected. If your customer is not even going to see that you're doing a production deployment you've screwed up in a production deployment, you can deploy to production anytime. So the cultural values I talked about that Amazon has are called leadership principles, and it is applicable to everybody, because everybody they think is a leader and should have the freedom to innovate. So if you haven't heard of the Amazon process of press releases, doing press releases and creating FAQs and writing 6-page narratives, again, it's widely available on the internet. Go read about it. So that's the process. So if I have a great idea and I'm a lowly employee in Amazon, I'm free to write a press release and an FAQ and a 6-page narrative, which obviously should have data. And as long as it all meets the leadership principles, I will be allowed to actually ideate or make that a reality. So innovation is not limited to a certain people. I try and DM some people some question because I don't want to flood the Slack channel, and they come back to me and say that, hey, why are you DMing me? Just ask me in public, right? So I'm very, very few private conversations, very few private emails in Envato, which I'm still getting used to. So one of the things that we wanted to do was, what is our engineering culture? So we wanted to set a pole star for the whole engineering team to swim towards, so that we're all not going in different directions. To create our engineering vision, what they did was, they asked the question, they did something called developer expectations. The question they asked was, what do you want it to be true of an Envato developer? So they asked this question of all the developers, and all the developers wrote a whole bunch of stuff. They created Trello cards and tried to consolidate everything that people had said. Now we are starting to think, like, what are the SLAs that we can provide? What are the availability, durability, and performance SLAs that we can provide? At the moment, all we are doing is we are ingesting AWS logs. So we are testing this theory out. It's just an MVP. And for the MVP, we have taken our own elk stack. Now, we are now thinking we should provide a consistent experience to our customers. We should be able to rip out our elk stack and replace it with Amazon Elasticsearch service. Maybe rip that out and replace it with Splunk or Sumo Logic or whatever it is, but we want to provide a consistent experience to our customers. So what are some other services that we can provide? So that is a definition that really resonated with me when I was figuring out what this DevOps thing was about. So it is a cultural and professional movement. So cultural, what is culture? So culture shared experience, shared morals, which have been handed down generations. So our experience dates back to Lucy's tribe. And our experiences are, our morals and the way we do things and the way we interact with each other, the way we communicate. All that is a part of DevOps, and it started with Lucy's tribe or before, and it's handed down from there. And it is cultural in the sense like culture as an Aboriginal culture. And as John was talking about, there were 30-odd people in Ghent in the first DevOps days, and how many do we have now? And it's a professional movement. You are a tool maker or you're a system administrator. It's a professional movement. It's a profession, and you practice that in your profession. So high-velocity organizations feel the pain first. They're not able to move fast enough. Their customers are demanding it. They're feeling the pain first. So a lot of this has come from people who are working in high-velocity organizations who felt constrained, who felt frustrated, which is where this movement comes from. And it is born of the experiences of these practitioners. It is an experience. So you can't have, I don't think you can have a DevOps degree or a DevOps certificate. It has to be born of experience. So thank you for your time.